There are signs that we're waking up into a new story that's not us and them. Us versus them taken to the extreme would be the doom of all of this separation. If it was created by us, it can be changed by us. The time has come for a new story. This is a form of reunion, to no longer separate the world in our minds. Things are not going to really change until the things that we have banished to the realm of the alternative are brought in, and we bring together everything that we know. God loves stories, and you could say we're putting on this performance for God, and that is a way to develop us as souls. The more we pay attention to what we are experiencing now, the more hopeful the world becomes, the more access we have to extraordinary possibilities. Every time that there is a breakdown, a collapse in our systems or even our structures of meaning, that other possibility shows itself to us. And then the question is, who do we have to become to manifest that possibility?
You talk about us being in an advanced state of separation. I just feel like this is something I think the term was society of advanced separation. And following a few of your pieces of work, there's this isolation, this loneliness, this, and I think it's just everybody can start to feel this at the moment. And I think it was just something that was really pertinent, and I think we could probably speak to it a little bit. So I wanted to take some time to sort of shed a ray of light on maybe you can start by defining what you mean by the society of advanced separation and potentially even how we got here.
I'm referring to separation from nature, from each other, from community, and increasingly from the material world altogether, from our own bodies, from connection, from our embodiment in the world, and also the social and political separation, where at least if you are online and in political discourses, the level of distrust and hatred toward each other is growing and growing, even to the point where it's invading families. Like you always read about, brother against brother. We're seeing that happen more and more. And the confinement of children indoors. I read a statistic that the average American child spends 7 minutes a day outdoors. So that's another form of separation. And, this is far advanced. Separation from the stories of the people around us would be another example that really began with the advent of radio and television that connected people to distant stories of distant people who they only know in one direction. Movie stars, celebrities, sports figures, politicians. We get wrapped up in their stories, where a much earlier culture mostly would be wrapped up in the stories of everyone else in the village, everyone else in the tribe, and then also the mythological stories that everybody shared. So there's many, many ways that we're becoming more and more separate. And I think that it's reaching some kind of crisis point where we have an opportunity to choose whether we want to continue on this route or whether we want to chart a different course. Because it's reaching an extreme. I mean, even the ways the wars, and the violence and the genocide and the ecocide. I mean, all of these things are showing us what is actually happening, and they're therefore giving us a choice.
So you do feel like it's not too far gone at the present moment with the state of current affairs?
I cannot come up with a plausible solution, a plausible plan for the healing of Earth that, if you are well steeped in doom and gloom and and collapse that you won't be able to rebut easily. And people, they come up with all kinds of theories. Oh, we just need 3% of the people to become conscious, or we just need to find the highest leverage points, or people just need to meditate more, or something like that. And there's some, if only, if only we could wave a wand and magically that many people would do something about it. I mean, fundamentally, all of this is created by human beings. All of our crises, all of this separation, it's not some outside force that did it to us. If it was created by us, it can be changed by us. So on a deeper level, it's not too far gone. It's never too far gone. But it's going to take a miracle. A miracle meaning something totally unfamiliar to us, something that seems impossible. But only on the other side of a miracle do you realize, well, it must be possible because it happened. And maybe what my idea of what's possible was a little bit too narrow.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think even like the harrowing start of what you said, like 7 minutes outdoors, and I think there's a bridge somewhere between, because so much of your work for me is the aliveness of myth in our lives as well, and just I wonder what the myth of this particular time is. I mean, following into some of your work, it became somewhat poetic for me when you started to refer to separation as an opportunity for an initiation. Like how much separation do we tolerate before we pop through? And is it naive of us to once again just sort of say, oh, the breakdown is happening for a breakthrough? Or do you see that as what's happening?
I think it offers the opportunity for a breakthrough. It's interesting you mentioned initiation because many indigenous and traditional initiations involved separation. The young man, the adolescent boy, would be taken away from his mother, from the village, taken to a hut, on the edge of the forest or deep in the forest, or tied to a tree, or made to go on a vision quest, taken outside of all of his familiar surroundings. And that would be a coming of age initiation. There's other initiations in life into each stage of life. And so separation is necessarily part of it. You have to, because our circumstances reinforce who we are. So what's happening now is all of these forms of separation generate a crisis that makes normalcy more and more intolerable, or makes normalcy break down altogether. Someone loses their job, or their health, or their marriage. And that is, all of those are a form of separation, or the result of separation. And, you're in unfamiliar circumstances now. When you're in unfamiliar circumstances and you no longer have the reinforcing conditioning, like if you get up in the morning and everything's the same, you're going to be the same, most likely. That's why it's so hard to break an addiction. Everything around you supports the addiction. Something has to happen. So when that something does happen, health, relationship, work, one of the three big areas in life, then you're no longer on autopilot. You're no longer just responding to the same thing you responded to yesterday. And, as people say, it's a wake-up call. It doesn't mean that you'll change, but it means you have an opportunity to change. And so maybe on the collective level, the same thing is happening. Because the people in, government agencies, in big organizations, it's not that they're oblivious to the fact that there's something wrong in the world, but they have so much inertia. It's almost impossible for them to do that much different than they always have done. until it totally stops working. And then you have the question, okay, now it's a choice. Now it's no longer a compulsion. It's a choice. And are we going to try to hold the whole thing together? Or are we just going to kind of give up on what was and step into that scary territory in between? Everybody listening to this has been there, I'm sure. Do you keep pretending things are okay? Sometimes you can pretend for a very long time. Or are you going to keep pretending that things are going to be okay again, that things are going to go back to normal again, that I'm going to find the same job, the same kind of job that I had, that I'm going to get back together with my partner, that I'm going to recover my health by doing the same things that I've been doing. Just maybe I'll try a different supplement. But at some point, you recognize that you're in new territory. And then I call it the space between stories. Then you don't know anything anymore. And that's really a beautiful and sacred time. And I think that we can see that on the horizon now for our society when, right now, most people are either clinging all the more tightly to the old conventional narratives, or they have jumped too quickly to a new narrative. Because people are uncomfortable in the space in between. So you can have a demagogue come along and say, oh, here's a new story to replace the old story, without really going through, here's somebody to blame for our problems, without really going through that process of, I don't know what's real anymore. That's where we have to be. So I don't know. I could talk more. I mean, I'm not sure how political you want me to get. But
you can go wherever you want, Charles. You're always so welcome here. I mean, the uncertainty in those liminal spaces is, understandably uncomfortable to sit in. But as you're saying, our relationship with the discomfort, well, because my work is in personal transformation, right? And so the formula for change for an individual is quite straightforward. It's basically you'll continue doing what you're currently doing until the alternative is either clearly the better option to go into, or the pain of staying the same is so difficult that that you switch into the other mode. And there's this choice that you're talking about, and I can see that. But I think the grandiosity of like the scale at which a change kind of feels like it's required is so intimidating that, just keeping your head buried in the sand to sort of hyper flick out to the extreme and just be like, oh, it's going to all change and just, but like not to sit in that liminal space, that little space between spaces. Can you tell us more about the space between spaces? And if you feel to go political, please, by all means, wherever you need to go to. Yeah.
The space between stories.
Yeah, space between stories.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you used to know what was real, how to be human, who you were, how the world works. And now all those answers don't make sense anymore. You don't know who you are anymore, even. You don't know what's real. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what's dependable. You don't know what to trust. You don't know how to take care of your body, maybe. And it's a very potent moment, because in that humility of I don't know, something genuinely new can come in. If you can stay there long enough for something new to grow, instead of to jump to another version, what you recognize later was just another version of the same old story. So, but even like, I don't want to set it up as something that you might do wrong if you jump too quickly, because even that is part of the process. We cling really tightly. That's one of the ways that we cling. So that is one of the meta patterns that maybe we need to let go of. The meta pattern of trying to identify what it is that I'm doing wrong. That's related to the pattern of blame in a political context. Whether it's left or right, they all have the same formula. Find the one to blame. Who are the bad guys? What's the pathogen? Who do we fight? Who do we punish? That's the diagnosis. The diagnosis for bad things in the world is bad people.
Us versus them.
Yeah. And so that story, that's an example of a story, or even you could call it a myth, because it's such a deep story, that bad things happen because bad people deliberately make them happen. Therefore, the solution to all of our problems is to find the right person to fight, the right person to dominate, the right person to destroy, to triumph over. Solutions become about winning and losing. What if that pattern is itself the problem? And here we get a little bit meta, and a little bit paradoxical, to say that the problem is the obsession with finding the problem, identifying one thing as the cause of everything. But it's it's an item in our lexicon, in our vocabulary, our pattern language, the elements of the stories that we use to understand the world. And I think that the time is upon us. This is a form of reunion, to no longer separate the world in our minds into the oppressors and the victims. It's not that those lenses are wrong or useless. There are many situations on this earth that you can look at through that lens and understand an awful lot of what's going on. But it becomes affixed to our eyeballs, that lens. And we seek to understand everything in that way. And it's not a big enough framework of understanding to encompass what is happening on this earth right now. And nor is it big enough to extricate us from our situation. So this is what I'm talking about, genuinely new stories, not simply replacing the occupants of the roles in the old stories. Both right and left have the same story, just different occupants of the role of bad guy.
Inspired Souls, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you that are subscribed to this podcast. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. And to all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, join the movement promoting love, positivity, and wisdom around the planet. Thank you so much in advance for doing so. So, one of the solutions that appears is to write a story where there's us and no them, like everyone's in the us. But then does such a story really engage? Do you know what I mean? Like, a story has a natural beginning, middle, and end. Do we get to a middle if it's just all, if it's all us?
Well,
or is it too idealistic? And as a spiritual podcaster, I'd love to think so, but also story has its narrative arc.
What is the plot line of a drama that is not driven by us and them? And it's interesting, like I say, that the time has come for a new story, not only because we better find a new story or we're screwed, but also because the time has arrived. I'm not just saying the time had better be here. I'm saying it actually is, and we see the evidence for that in some of the new plot lines that are emerging in entertainment media. Like some of the, still most of the stories, like when you watch a movie, the habit is to try to figure out, okay, who's the bad guy going to be, But there are some now that are not driven by that plot device. Thinking of some kids' movies like Inside Out, for example. Or if there is a bad guy, the resolution isn't to kill the bad guy, but the resolution has to do with redemption
Embracing.
or awakening, which is very different and a much more hopeful prescription for how this world will heal. Because I don't think that it's possible to overcome if you see the world through the lens of victims and perpetrators, good guys and bad guys, then it's hopeless because the bad guys are more ruthless. They're going to win at a fight. As some say, our compassion or our empathy is a weakness to be exploited by the enemy. And you see what happens when even one side believes that. The result is endless war or even genocide. So these movies are offering a different kind of drama that doesn't depend on good guys and bad guys. And it's still, to answer your question, it still is an interesting drama. It still offers, it's not boring. It's not, okay, we're all one now, so, kumbaya. Actually, I hate to use kumbaya as a term of derision. It's actually a really beautiful song. So, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like this boring, diffuse end of history. We're barely even aware of what other dramas could exist that aren't based on us versus them, or even that aren't based on conflict. That's even a deeper level. And there's very, very few films or examples of stories that aren't based, at least on some level, on conflict. The only one I can think of is My Neighbor Totoro. Have you seen that? It's a Miyazaki movie.
No, I haven't.
Beautiful movie. Yeah, that's the first movie I show my children. I mean, I keep them away from screens, until a certain age, maybe 3, 4, and then very, very judiciously, allow some. And that's one of the earliest ones because, for one thing, it's really slow paced. It doesn't, barrage the brain with one stimulus after another. But also, it's very gentle and it doesn't contribute to the programming of children to see the world in us versus them terms, which is also programming for victimhood and a surrender of sovereignty and agency. Because the world is kind of against you. You're the good guy. You're the hero. There's the bad guys. And what happens when things don't work out well? It must be because something was more powerful than you and thwarted you. So it sets up this oppositional relationship. I mean, it's obvious if you're watching media all the time and hearing stories all the time, and the adults around you are always talking about, so they're always in a mindset of blame, then you're going to take that on, and you're going to see the world in those terms. And so this affects relationships in love and work. It affects politics. It pervades everything. So when I talk about a new story and the necessity to even let go into that space of unknowing, where we don't organize the world that way anymore, we give up on that. We give up on we give up on the habit of always trying to win, of always trying to fight. There are times that you have to fight. There are times when you have to set boundaries. There are times when you are, in fact, being persecuted. there are predators out there. But that's not the universal explanation for everything wrong in the world. And when we see everything in those terms, then we are stuck and we never exit the drama that just intensifies and intensifies and becomes more and more dangerous as we develop more and more weapons of mass destruction. But yeah, sorry, I'm going on a long time here.
No, I'm
I'll say one
following.
more thing though.
No, please don't stop.
Yeah. Okay. So when I say that the time has come for a new story, really the time, it was knocking at the door already in the 1940s when we developed the first weapon of mass destruction that made it clear, once the Soviet Union got the bomb also, it was clear that us versus them taken to the extreme would be the doom of all of us and them. You have to find another way to resolve your conflicts besides fighting it out. And as nuclear weapons have proliferated, and as bioweapons and all kinds of other technologies, and the effects of environmental pollution too, like more and more has happened that erases the distinction between us and them, that makes it clear that what we do to them, we are also doing to us. So this is another reason why we need a new story, why the time has come for a new story. It's because our interconnectedness and our interdependency has become so much more urgently obvious.
I mean, as you're referring, my question was going to be about competition because it seems like it pervades just about everything in a capitalistic society. But I wanted to bring it back maybe to the individual a little bit because, I mean, this conflict, you mentioned the word conflict and, that as a device. I mean, recently I've been studying self-discipline quite deeply. And even just watching where self-discipline for the individual comes from. And many times the discipline factor comes from the child's relationship with the parent. Like the parent spends this time disciplining the child, and that's how the child learns to fall into the box to get things done. And so, continues that. And then as they step further into their adolescence, young adult, they're also used to like, oh, I can't be bothered you better get out of bed to go to work. There's like this discipline. And, when you start to zoom in, actually you'll notice, well, I've come to notice that there is this opposition within oneself, because it's like there's the natural flow that the individual wants to flow into, but then there's the discipline to get the things that they need to get done. And it's almost like there's Mac iOS and also Windows sort of combating with an individual. There's like two operating systems, combating within the individual. And maybe I'm just at the right tipping point age-wise where, I got to the realization where it's like that consumes a lot of energy, sort of the internal conflict, and sort of starting to surrender this whole one's individual, like you should, or, the discipline factor is like there's got to be a way beyond self-discipline almost where, one gives oneself permission to flow into the things that come naturally to them. Maybe it's a bit idealistic once again, but, just to surrender all that pressure that's coming from running two different energy, like channeling one person's energy into two different sources, which then get things done via conflict. Can you see what I'm pointing to there, or am I making any sense?
Yeah, I've been interested in that question for quite a while. And I know exactly what you're talking about. On the one hand, maybe I'll just kind of rephrase it. The impulse to go with the flow and to trust my natural desires, and not go to war against myself and try to make myself do things that I don't really want to do. And then on the other hand, like how that just becomes really dissolute and stagnant. So you mentioned the disciplining of children, and how it instills a habit of discipline. So how do we actually discipline children? Normally, it's through some kind of threat and reward system. And the most potent threat is rejection by the parent. That's why punishment is so traumatizing. It's beyond just, even if there's no physical pain involved, it's rejection by the parent. And the most potent reward is praise and acceptance by the parent. So even if the reward is a treat, it is a token of acceptance, and a punishment is a token of rejection. So this is a type of force exercised on children because, being mammals, our young are terrified of abandonment. It's hardwired into mammals because they depend on their parents. Fish, not so much. Fish don't have an abandonment fear, but we mammals do. So it is a kind of force. So when it gets internalized, we learn to force ourselves to do things in order to get the self-approval and avoid the self-rejection. What the problem with that is that when that force is not aligned with our sole purpose or our mission or what's good for ourselves or other people, then we are overriding those instincts in order to accomplish the goals that we are disciplined to accomplish. It also that kind of parenting conditions us to be further manipulated by authority that also meets out rewards and punishments, and you're a good citizen and you're accepted, or you're outcast, also by society. Social pressure is all about acceptance and rejection. There's all that, and I don't know. Sometimes I look at people that I know who are super productive and super efficient, and I'm envious of their discipline. And sometimes all that discipline isn't going towards something that's really fulfilling. And maybe they would be happier if they were less disciplined and hung out with their kids more, But some of them, I don't know, some of them seem to be very disciplined, including prioritizing time with their kids, and minimizing their distractions and addictions and stuff. So I don't have like a full answer to that, that tension that you're speaking of.
Inspired souls, living beings, if you're feeling out of alignment or feeling like the life that you're living right now isn't the life of your highest calling, then this is why I offer one-to-one mentoring and coaching. As you can tell, supporting people through spiritual mentorship and entrepreneurship coaching is at the heart of my deepest passions and desires, and everything you see around here at The Inspired Evolution is my calling. And it'd be an incredible gift to support you in finding yours. This is the work that I've been doing through mentoring and conscious masterminding for the last decade. You don't just have to take my word for it. This is how people all over the world have transformed through this work.
I don't even recognize myself from 3 years ago. I don't recognize myself from a year ago. All of these things that I've been wanting to manifest in my life, I have them now.
This entire year has been a complete transformation.
He is literally just there to put wind in your sails.
He really seems to love his work and his clients. He's going to squeeze all the juice out of life and encourage his clients to do the same.
Amrit definitely delivered more than I expected. Was able to steer it in the right way, the way my soul needed to hear. I think that's what makes him so unique as a coach.
He's wonderful. He really can help to do wonders with your project. Go for it.
So if any of that resonates and you feel inspired to evolve and you're ready to live fully into alignment to create the life that is absolutely abundant, free and prosperous and aligned to your purpose, then book in a call with me. amritsandhu.com/call. That's Amrit Sandhu, AMRITSANDHU.com/call, CALL. I'll put a link in the description below. I'd love to hear from you, support you on your journey further if it's in alignment. I'll see you there. Yeah, my intention by pointing to that particular tension is just using it as an example of how much tension there lives within one's individual self. Because we were discussing the tensions of the forces at large when we got super meta, but then also they seem to mirror these kind of forces that are going on within ourselves, and you were talking about rewriting this story. And I just found that this really, like when we talk about conflict, there's conflict hidden in these places within us that we may not even be aware of. And then, there's all like, we see conflict And I mean, so much of the narrative arc and the drama of conflict, the limbic system it's got the perfect sort of hand and glove fit for it in many ways as well, you know, because like you said, we are mammalian, and that survival gene is just so strong. I mean, I've got a really dear friend, and yeah, I mean, he's a very interesting individual. But one of the things that I like to joke about with him is he's kind of missing the gene for competition. He just he just doesn't have it, and it's really interesting because we run like men's work together and stuff like that. And watching him like interact with other people, and especially when you get together like, you know, 16, 17 men together for men's work, you know, it's a long retreat that we go through. But at the beginning, you can sort of see, you know, the sort of egos sort of rubbing up against each other. But it's really amazing watching himself sort of interact with everybody else because he just doesn't have that. He's missing the chromosome for competition. I say that lovingly and with a little bit of awe in there. And yeah, there's this, I mean, when you talk about rewriting a whole narrative, we've discussed this in previous podcasts, like even the way like economic structures are set up and incentives are set up, and this is back to the child with like, you know, the punishment and the reward system, like a whole new reward system seems to be required in terms of how one satisfies themselves with what's good for them and what's I don't want to use the word right, but next, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Competition has a lot of functions. Competition can be a way to clarify what is yours to do, and it can be a way to develop latent capacities. You know, if you know, I was on the track team, you know, in high school and college, and competition clarified that I was not a sprinter, you know, not going to do well at the shot put or the discus, but I was pretty good at, you know, middle distance and distance, you know, so, and then it gave me a container. Basically, it is a kind of it's a kind of a theater. You know, everyone gets together and says, okay, we're going to pretend that this is important. On some level, everybody knows that it's not important, that a race is not important, that a football game is not important, you know, a rugby match, it's not actually important. Everybody knows that. Just as everybody knows that, you know, King Lear wasn't actually, you know, this person is not actually King Lear who's been rejected by his daughters. You know that. But that is okay. You willingly enter into the drama. So competition, sports is like that. You all enter into it. You create this drama. You all agree to pretend that it's important because it brings something out in you. It brings out all kinds of things. It develops your character. It develops your discipline, your capacities, and your body, and that's a certain kind of expression of the beauty of the human form. And so, different kinds of dramas provide the opportunity to express and develop different capacities that are inside of us. And in a way, like all of the dramas of life are like that. On some level, just as we know that the football game is not really important, that there's a bigger reality outside of it, the same lurking knowledge is present for all of this, for all of life, that this is a drama. It's a show. It's a game that we have agreed to pretend is real, and we have agreed to take very seriously. And that's not unenlightened of us. It's not that we should ascend or transcend the game and all, be in the reality that none of this is real and it's all a dream. No, we created it for a good reason on the soul level. We created it because of just the same as we create, theater. It is developmental. God loves stories, and you could say we're putting on this performance for God, and that is a way to develop us as souls. So absolutely, we should take it seriously. But on some level, we also understand that there's a bigger reality than all of the personas and all the roles that we play in life. So competition is like that. We need containers for competition because it brings things out that otherwise would not exist. Same for economic competition.
Yeah, but so thank you. However, one of the things that I can feel in there is potentially when even like you said, like, it clarifies through the process of me that, and there actually is a sense of connection that, it may not be the type of connection that is like the kind of loving connection that we seek within our family nests and stuff like that. But there is a sense of connection that one drives from, like, you called it theater, you called it a game, you called it performance. And I mean, all of those things seem to be somewhat time bound. Yeah, like you go to the theater, it's a show for a moment. You play a game, it's got a beginning and an end. And then there's a space where one, after the theater, retires and rests into. I mean, for me, what I feel at the moment is people don't have the spaces to retire and rest into, and those connections around them to sort of nest into as well, right? Because the game is so, I don't want to say omnipresent. That makes it sound even more pervasive than it is, but it is quite pervasive. Do you know what I mean? The sense of the show, the theater, the performance, and like the on. It's like you don't get to rest off in connection, and maybe therein lies one of these strands, is that there's so much connection of a particular kind in performance. Do you get where I'm pointing to there?
Yeah. Well, we do though. I guess if you could be a spiritual practice, meditation, or just like whatever you do to pull back from the fray, in being in nature. I would also say that there will come a day when this all seemed very short, this life. The older I get, the shorter life is, not only ahead of me, but behind me too. And because more and more years collapse into one thing, which is called the past. My past contains more and more, therefore it's shorter and shorter, if that makes sense. And I'm sure that on my deathbed, it will seem like this all happened in the blink of an eye. And then, we'll really be in the space between stories. And, to go home from the theater. But there's also breaks. Good filmmakers and good playwrights have an intuition that you actually do need a break. It's called humor. Like a really good, serious drama will have moments of humor. What that does is it pulls you temporarily out of the seriousness of the story. And the same thing with moments of humor in our daily lives. When you laugh with somebody at something, you're stepping out of the drama. That's why if like a couple is fighting, often the breakthrough comes when all of a sudden they start laughing. Have you ever had that happen? Like you're arguing about something.
Yes, can relate.
Like with me and Stella.
Hear how ridiculous you're being at some point. And
it's like we're arguing about where I should plant the fig tree And it's like, well, there's a stone wall here. Oh, but that's too close to the house. We got like really upset about it. And then at some point we just look at each other and smile. It's like, hold on a second. This isn't real. This argument, it brought up something, but come on, like, it there's a bigger reality here. And that moment of humor, humor is always a peace offering in times of conflict. It's like, hey, would you like to step out and laugh at this whole thing? You're always stepping out, or usually, maybe not all kinds of humor, but it's very often stepping out. So I would say that to respond to your point, maybe just to validate your point, we do need to step out of the drama in order to play it well. And that could happen through meditation, spiritual practice, or humor, or illness.
Touch wood. You've been in some really interesting spaces recently, writing speeches and do you see people coming more and more back to these practices and spirituality from your worldview at the moment? Or, do you see people taking these breaks?
I do. It just seems like it's going both directions at once. People are getting deeper and deeper into hate narratives, and maybe in other aspects of their lives that aren't political and don't involve group identity so much. They're becoming more and more compassionate. I've noticed people becoming more friendly and polite. Like even when I go through airport security or interact with, someone in a hotel or something like that. So there are signs that we're waking up, into a new story that's not us and them, that we're learning to see with different eyes each other. But, in the political realm, things seem to be getting worse and worse. And, I did my best to inject a note of peace into politics as a speechwriter. And it felt like that effort was overwhelmed by a tsunami of political division. It's kind of heartbreaking. But, and now when I advocate, when I say, hey, both sides are coming from somewhere. Neither side consists of horrible people. They have their own beliefs that make what they're doing seem totally logical. They're not evil people. Like that betrays the narrative of each side, that the other side is horrible. And so I, become a persona non grata to both sides. Each side thinking that I'm an ally of the other side. So, like, I get called a right winger right now, even though, my beliefs are anything but right wing.
Yes, if you listen to your other two episodes here, yeah.
I'm all about ecological healing and post-colonial development and indigenous rights and
the gift economy,
like the rewriting of capitalism, and the full dignity and humanization of all people, because dehumanization is at the core of racism and sexism and misogyny and homophobia and all those things. Like how did I all of a sudden become a right winger? It happened in COVID, really, when I was highly critical and doubtful of the corporate government narrative. But since when is doubting and dissenting from large institutions right wing? So anyway, but if what happens when political divisions intensify is that there's less and less room to remain outside of those divisions, because every issue gets politicized, and if you hold the wrong opinion on any one of those many issues, then you're a pariah. And I'm sure you could have people on this podcast who would give a totally different account, who would say that I'm enabling, resurging fascism by minimizing there's all kinds of arguments to be made. And, I just, I don't even like getting into this thing of defending myself or explaining myself. Oh, this isn't actually both sidesism, because those arguments they're boring for me, and they make it about me, and I don't care. I'm not in this to establish myself as an acceptable person. That's not my goal in, being a public intellectual, or a public philosopher, or whatever I can call myself without sounding too pompous. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I actually care about the healing of society and the planet. And I'm, for better or for worse, maybe I'm not always right about things, but that's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to establish myself as acceptable. So those conversations are boring to me to justify myself. So I just don't engage that. I avoid it as much as possible. But then I'm not even meeting the criticisms. So it just kind of makes me want to. It just gives me this feeling of futility, and maybe I should be doing something else at this historical moment. Maybe there comes a moment where you just got to shut up, not because you're intimidated, but because you're okay, maybe there's a time to speak and a time to stay silent, a time when you're not really being heard. So why speak if you're not being heard? And I know that some are hearing me, but I don't know. I get the feeling of preaching to the choir because there's just not much of a listening for anything but amplifying the us versus them narrative. So I don't know. I'm sorry if I've been talking about myself too much here.
No, you haven't been. I think the sentiment of futility is not something that's just. Yeah, and sorry, it sounds like to narrow everything you just said down into that word makes it, pardon me for how that lands at your end. But I think that sentiment of futility, I think there's a grain of that everybody seems to carry at this particular time, which I do wonder if it speaks back to where we started, the disconnection, because it's yeah, it's not the same as redundancy. We don't feel redundant, but you mentioned before, to hear someone as, I don't want to sound overly grandizing, but prolific as yourself, placing peace in these places and also feeling like the tsunami sort of comes and, washes over in terms of its faculties and devices, that then, I don't want to say the layperson, but again, I'm grandizing you, but pardon me for that. But the futility thread is, I think there's something in there to be I think we should shine a light on that, because I think it's not just you carrying that. I really don't think so.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people are feeling futility, and it's maybe a hallmark of a breakdown in the story. It's futility is basically the feeling of this isn't working anymore. A lot of people have that feeling. A lot of organizations, a lot of people have that feeling.
Would you call that the crisis of meaning? Because I mean, even earlier on, like I remember in one of our previous episodes, you talked about just this, like you've had this sense forever since you can remember that something's a little bit off. I remember you sort of portraying like I'm sitting in a classroom doing stuff like writing, like submitting worksheets or whatever, but it's the most beautiful day outside.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, Charles, when you said that. I was like, yeah, man. Because I remember sitting in an office cubicle and just like working away and just going, but man, it's so nice outside. Like, what am I doing trapped in here?
Right. A sense of a wrongness in the world. It's not supposed to be this way. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, maybe a different feeling than futility, but I guess it's related. Futility also for me is like, I didn't always have the sense of futility in my writing, but maybe it's a sign that phase has come to an end, when what you're doing stops working for you. It's different than the crisis in meaning for me, but it can go along with a crisis in meaning. But a lot of people have this. You're right. Like you enter into some new job, or it could be even a new relationship, and it is so expansive for a while, and it gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, and then at some point it starts to get old, and you're no longer developing, and your accomplishments seem less and less meaningful, and then maybe you for a while you try to make it work. You try to make another $1 million. You say maybe you try to double your audience and double it again, whatever your profession is, and that works for a little while. But at some point, you realize that the solution isn't even more success at what you've been doing, and that can feel like a loss of ambition. So that feeling of futility and loss of ambition is a good thing. It's your soul rebelling against continuing to do something that you've actually explored the boundaries of already and is no longer developmental. Because we enter different acts of the play, to explore who we are in that role. And at some point that act is done. It's time to move on to act 3. And let me see if I can keep act 2 going for a bit longer, because I was really good at that. But and you can do it for a while, but sometimes it's just over, and then you have to accept that and transition. I'm kind of giving myself coaching here as I speak, but I think that it's applicable to many, many people, and a lot of chapters are ending as the changes in the economic and political realm intensify.
Yeah. I think that I heard this interestingly recently in terms of humans beings, like the thing that they dread the most is change. Like we're just like the mind sort of goes, oh, change, moving from one act to the next. And yet when you look at like a human being and just like we're like we are evolution, and like a human being is in a nutshell change. It's like we are change. It's like our innate being is change, and yet our biggest fear is kind of change as well at the same time. It's so interesting, the human condition. I mean, as you were referring to what you're referring to before, I mean, I was going to use the word maturation. Like, is that just something that comes from maturation, like kind of like understanding that there are cycles and that actually there's like a futility in it? Like, okay, so to this is now, and then that sort of naturally refines everything. Because even the way you put it before, like I think that's one of those things that's going to stay with me forever, Charles, is, you know, as you move further and further along on your journey, you're like the past is becoming this, everything just gets filed in this filing cabinet that's the past, you know, and it's just one cabinet, you know, so it all just seems like, oh, it all fits in just that one little cabinet. And then you're looking back kind of going, what, you know? But yeah, I mean, the change, it's always happening. And yet there's this incredible resistance to it at all times as well. Like even just some of the slogans that have been touted around recently, like go back to what was again, you know, it was just don't change.
Yeah, make America great again.
Yeah, try not to change, you know, like we back to Act 2.
Yeah. Right, which always brings up the question, you know, was it ever great? And if so, in what ways was it great? And in what ways wasn't it great? When I was working with Kennedy, I proposed a slogan that he actually did use once or twice because I wrote it into a speech, but he resonated with it very strongly. It was the America that almost was and yet may be. So speaking to a possibility of greatness that maybe we glimpsed that never fully manifested, you know, even at the peak of the American moment, the American dream, which maybe happened in, I don't know, 1960. Even then, you know, we were just coming out of Jim Crow, you know, there was segregation in the South, you know, the indigenous of North America were horribly oppressed, and there was, you know, very little tolerance for gay people, and I mean there was an awful lot that was not great, but there was something great, you know. But even then, we didn't. But at least then, it seemed like we were waking up to those problems too, you know, and we were going to heal. All of the civil rights movement was underway, you know, the feminist movement was underway. So that it looked like we were moving in the right direction. And then that timeline was broken on November 22nd, 1963. That was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And so, you know, I was speaking this to his nephew, you know, RFK Jr., and there was definitely some truth there, you know, and like maybe you can reconnect that timeline. Because John F. Kennedy was an anti-imperialist. You know, he was going to disengage from Vietnam. You know, he supported and wanted the U.S. to support independence movements around the third world, especially Africa. He wanted to, you know, shatter the CIA and scatter the pieces to the wind, he said. He was at loggerheads with the military-industrial complex. And, you know, that's why he was assassinated. And that timeline was averted. And so I really advocated, like, make your campaign about that, about reconnecting to that possibility. You know, it's a story. I mean, you can also say that the forces that resulted in the JFK assassination were very well established well before then, and that we never really were on the timeline that I just described, the positive timeline. But at least there was a possibility of it, you know? And it touches me because it seems like there's this other possibility for human history that it's always underneath the surface, but sometimes it comes near the surface. There's like outcroppings of it where we catch a glimpse of where we could go as humanity. You know, like I don't know, classical Athens, you know, or Tang Dynasty China, you know, or the American Revolution. Like, not that everything was perfect then either, but there was a glimpse of something, something was trying to emerge, and it's always been trying to emerge throughout history. And sometimes it comes close and we can see it as a possibility. And then we go back into the darkness, because most of history has been pretty dark, but it exists. And every time that there is a breakdown, a collapse in our systems or even our structures of meaning, that other possibility shows itself to us. And then the question is, who do we have to become to manifest that possibility? Because it's not just something that happens to us. It's something that we have to participate in. Are we ready for that possibility? Are we ready for a political system that isn't based on dehumanizing the enemy? It isn't based on us versus them. It isn't based on exploitation and national chauvinism and winning at the expense of somebody losing. Trump is all about winning. Well, if there's a winner, there's a loser. It's us versus them. It's separation. Are we ready for that? Well, are we? How do we enact these dramas in our own lives? Do we wish others harm? Do we seek to win at the expense of others losing? Do we really understand that every single human being is a full human being? Divinity embodied, a creation of God, soul made flesh. Do we really understand that? And if we don't, and we don't act accordingly, how can we expect our political system and our historical dramas to be anything different than what they are?
Inspired souls, lumen beings, if you're loving this video, don't forget to give it a like and a thumbs up. It helps share it around the internet. And also join in on the conversation. It's always profound for me tuning into the comments section on these videos and listening into and sharing and joining the conversation with you guys in terms of what you guys are taking away. So leave the comments below. What are you taking away from today's conversation? Charles himself is quite active on socials at times as well, and he may just reply to you if you have some questions for him. This is the third or fourth time he's been back on the podcast. So if you are interested in asking him some questions, maybe if you can leave them below as well, I can ask them of him next time he comes back on. Join in on the conversation. Back to it. I mean, there's almost an invitation, but it's not. I know it's not, but that's why I'm going to clarify this. There's almost an invitation for church and state to be united in some way there, but it's not about church. It's more about divinity in, I'll say descending upon us because it's innate within us. But yeah, there's a rub in there.
Yeah, the universe is not divided into two parts. The sacred and the profane, the spiritual and the material.
As much as some of the narrative arcs may lead you to believe.
Yeah, ultimately, these do have to be unified, matter and spirit. I mean, this is an aspect of the separation that we were talking about before, the separation of matter and spirit, the export of sacredness onto a non-material realm and a non-political realm. Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, maybe not an institutional church, that is merged with the state, but a bringing of our sense of the sacred into all aspects of life, including the political. I mean, right now it's, kind of cordoned off. Like, where's the understanding of, forgiveness in politics, or, telepathy, or all of the things that we have banished to the realm of the alternative and the impossible that are actually real. They have no place in politics, and things are not going to really change until they are brought in and we bring together everything that we know.
Can I take us down that path a little bit? Because, we started today's conversation in separation, connection, isolation, healing. And I mean, one of I say my highest value is connection. And I mean, yes, connecting to yourself here is super enriching for me. Connecting to the audience, connecting to people one-on-one in coaching. So connection runs really deep for me, but it's in my awareness that connection for me is not limited to individuals. Connection is also, I use the word God quite openly, but for some people it triggers, but, connection to God and connection to nature. And recently there was a really beautiful video you put out, and if it's okay, I'll link it in the show notes in the description below, about, you called it subtle energies.
Subtle senses. Yeah.
Subtle senses, sorry, my apologies. Yeah. Subtle senses. And I mean, there's so much in there, and that's why I recommend people. It's not a very long video, but the opportunity to sort of, maybe I should let you tell us about subtle senses.
What we accept conventionally, scientifically as real is only a very small part of what is actually real and actually possible. So, in that video was from a Zoom call that I did with my online community, an online community that I co-host with Patsy. Patsy is my fabulous former wife and kind of business partner. And I can't remember how it came. It was very organic. I guess I would have to, instead of describing it, I would have to return to it right now, because here we are speaking to one another by video. It's a one-on-one conversation, but we also know that there are others listening and maybe watching. And there's an awareness of that. Like if we were just hanging out and we weren't recording, we would have a different conversation. Okay.
Very likely.
Very likely. So there's a mental level where I'm like, okay, I know that others are going to be listening to that. So, maybe there's certain things I won't talk about, like maybe that I would if I was with a buddy, but it's not just that. Okay. I'm actually speaking to more than one person right now. When you have a conversation with somebody and they already know what they're going to say because, they're a 9/11 truther and they talk about the same thing to everybody, or they're whatever they are. I don't want to disparage 9/11 truthers. Okay. I all these, there's like a subtle note of dehumanization in all of this. But just say like someone's got their thing, and they already know what they're going to talk about. Like you feel distant from them. That's alienating, It's like, oh God, here they go again, They're not really talking to me. They're just doing their thing. Okay.
Right.
So if I just do my spiel, and maybe there are moments in this conversation where I kind of felt like, okay, I'm just, talking about this again, but I try to be present. But I'm not just being present to you. I'm like, okay, actually, there are others here right now. And if I tune into those, even though they're separated in space and time, right? It's going to be, I don't know how many weeks before you post this, but they're also here right now. None of my conventionally accepted senses can detect these other people. Scientifically, according to, what is accepted as science, scientifically, there's no way that I can be speaking to these people in the present. There's no way I can be sensing these other people. This is what I call subtle senses that I actually can. And everybody can. We all have these senses, but they have been denied as real. And so they atrophy. We don't pay attention to them. We don't trust them. But we can do it. You and I can tune in right now, and it's not that hard to feel the presence of many others who are witnessing our conversation. it's easier for me if I shut out my most overwhelming senses, which are vision and hearing.
Visual, sound.
So especially vision, if I close my eyes, I'm much more easily aware of these other people. And those listening, when I tune into you like this, if you're listening, you have the experience that I'm talking to you right now, that you're not listening to a recording, but I'm speaking to you right now. I'm present with you right now. And the reason you have that sense is that it's true. I am present with you right now. And in this age of separation, I'm still doing it. That's why my eyes are closed right now.
Same.
In this age of separation, when so many interactions are mediated by technology, we're not in person much anymore. We really need these to develop and trust these subtle senses. And so when I tune in, I can, just as if I'm looking at somebody as I speak to them and reading their facial expression, so much goes on in a face-to-face conversation. So also can I tune into what so many people right now, because time collapses, right now are feeling and thinking. Many, many different responses, from kind of eye rolling and just kind of discomfort to really feeling met and validated. And if you are listening now, you can also not only feel a real-time connection with you and I, you and me, but also with the others listening. Because we are linked together through my voice. So this is an example of where we're going. And the possibilities that become available through subtle senses are just mind-blowing, limitless. But we have to learn to trust it. This is how deep the revolution goes. It's not just about political systems or economic systems or elections. It goes all the way to this level. Who we are, what we pay attention to. It's really what we pay attention to. And the more we pay attention to what we are experiencing now, the more hopeful the world becomes. The more access we have to extraordinary possibilities. It's a whole realm of possibility out there. And we're just, toe deep in it. I mean, I'm not claiming to be any expert, far from it.
Yeah.
It's almost like the opposite. It's like, if I can do it, and then I'm like pretty, heady and left brain.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, is it too poetic to call it a revolution in connection? It's connection itself is evolving when you're feeling into spaces like that. Like this. Sorry, my apologies. Like this. Yeah. And I think we've landed squarely back at where we started, the initiation that is nigh, I guess. Yeah. I'm whole. Charles. Thank you so much for this. I mean, I'll call it a podcast for now, but it's a transmission. As always, it is always such a treat and a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you always for sharing yourself so openly, rawly, abundantly. It is, it's a blessing to receive. It's healing in and of itself. And I just have so much love and respect for you and your work in the world. So thank you for your time here today, but also thank you for you. I always receive so much from you, the way you carry yourself. And,
beautiful. Thank you so much, Amrit. Really appreciate our conversations.
You, inspired soul, you made it through to the end of another incredible episode. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this conscious path by your side. Today's episode with Charles Eisenstein was absolutely incredible. I want to take a moment to thank all of you that are subscribed to the podcast. As I like to say, as you've heard me say, everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. Thank you so much again for your incredible love and support. And you have made it all the way through to the end of the episode, so please, if you do like it, give it a like and a thumbs up. And to all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon. Episodes like this are coming out twice a week to support you on your Inspired Evolution onwards, upwards, and inwards to promoting love, positivity, and wisdom. It'd be such an honor to have you join the movement. On screen now, my previous episode with Charles Eisenstein, all about the gift economy disrupting capitalism. Tune into that here.